The more crazy measures that government take to take your money away from you, the less people are going to abide by or, accept the laws of the country.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with our monthly Matterhorn interview, but this time a bit different than the usual months. Egon von Greyerz is there for our Q&A session. Egon, glad to see you in Britain, obviously. How are you?
I'll, here for a few days, see my family, and then slowly but going back to Switzerland, but via Sweden. Christmas will be in Sweden, where I of course I was actually born. But so it's right now white in Sweden anyway, so that'll be nice.
And it's time for some holiday and for a little bit rest after a busy year. Let's
Nice.
come to our questions, Egon. We got quite a good number from our viewers.
Yes.
The
Yes.
first one
Fantastic.
here, I wonder what Egon von Greyerz thinks about privatization of currency. Is currency not too important to leave it to the government to mess around with it? I would agree with that, but do we have another choice?
No, we don't, and it's going to get worse, Jan. I mean, sadly, there was a time when there were private currencies issued, and each bank could issue their own currency, etc. Back in history, but those days are gone. Governments are in total control. By being in total control, they are consistently destroying the money. As we know, there's every single currency has gone to zero, and the only money that's ever survived in history is gold. So, therefore, governments are there to destroy the currency. Now, and this is why we're also, of course, advising investors to hold gold, because gold is the only currency that has survived. So therefore, forget about governments. Don't hold your money in fiat paper money. Hold it in gold and a bit of silver instead. And that will avoid the control of governments. And that's so wonderful. So that's a simple solution. We don't need governments involved or interfering with our money, and that's why we should hold precious metals instead.
Absolutely. Next one. For some time now, I have been investing in platinum and palladium and no longer just gold and silver in order to achieve more diversification. What do you think of this?
For us, they're good metals too. Of course, they are industrial metals, much more than gold and silver, although silver is also very industrial. We think that gold is the king of wealth preservation. So that's the number one. That's what you should hold. Silver, if you want more volatility and more excitement, silver fills that role in our view. Silver is also, of course, industrial and is used for a lot of various industrial products like solar panels, etc. I think that you are actually well served with just gold and silver. Gold for the stability and the most important precious metal, silver for faster appreciation. And therefore, the other markets are so small and the margins, the spreads between buying and selling are so high. So I think that, by having the majority in gold and some of your money, maybe let's say 25% or so in silver, that then you've covered everything and you don't need to hold platinum and palladium just for diversification. And they haven't been easy to invest in either because of the volatility.
That fits to our next question, Egon. What do you think of commodities like copper and lithium, which are in great demand for electrification? Could they even fall in price if the global economy collapses? What impact would this have on the silver price?
Yes, so of course industrial metals can fall if we have a real downturn, and they will fall, definitely, especially if we get a serious downturn. Silver is also, as we said, partly an industrial metal today, but I think, Jan, as the precious metals start rising and as the world economy is really starting to suffer and the world financial system coming under pressure and the banks coming under pressure and gold goes up, I think silver will take the role of a real precious metal rather than just an industrial metal, and therefore silver will move as a precious metal, not as an industrial metal. So therefore, If gold doubles, then I think silver will go up twice as fast, for example. So that therefore I wouldn't worry too much about when from the point of view of industrial demand. Silver is really for gold, for everybody's gold, because you get an ounce of silver for $25 basically. So that's, and I think a lot of smaller investors will buy into silver for wealth preservation.
And Egon, recently I researched some relationships. We had the topics recently about the interest expenses of the US government that is approaching 1 trillion. And I accounted for the gold and silver production, the value of this of 2022, and that was 250 billion or so. That means that only the interest payments for the US is 4 times as big as the total gold and silver production of a whole year. And not only the US is making debt. So to keep this in mind, what relationship we face here.
Yeah, the whole value of precious metals, including the precious metal stocks, is just ridiculous, of course, compared to any Microsoft or Amazon or whatever company you want to look at. The whole sector in precious metals is just worth a fraction of these kind of stocks. We will see a revaluation once the system comes under pressure. And in my view, the next leg up of the bull market of silver and gold has started now. It's not going to go in a straight line. We saw a fast move up to $2,100 in gold, for example, or a bit above, and then now we see a correction. But the next leg up has started, and I think that's what people should focus on. And I would expect much higher levels in coming years.
Egon, as you say, and also David Morgan says, if you are a careful investor, you should have your money or your big chunk of money that is reserved for the precious metals in physical metal. Nevertheless, many people gamble with some mining stocks. And here the next question: if the overall market should collapse at some point, do you think that gold mines will be able to withstand this? Ultimately, mines are just shares that will fall with the market for the time being. We saw this in the past already. If there is a real big washout at the general stock market, usually precious metal stocks are also affected, but they recover much faster. At least that's the pattern of the past. What do you think?
Yeah, exactly. This was what happened in 2008, for example. Jan, when the market crashed, silver and gold came down, and the shares came down a lot more, and they took a long time for them to recover. But if you have a major crash, like 30% crash or so, which is not unlikely that happens one day in the not long-term future, remember then people lose money on stocks. They often need liquidity, and not that a lot of people hold gold or silver, but gold and silver, of course, is the most liquid asset you have. You can sell within a second. So therefore, we saw that in 2008, people have made good money in gold and silver. On the margin, people sold. But, as you say, they will recover. Now we're getting into the real bull market of gold and silver here, in my view. Or more correctly put, the real bear market in currencies. That's what we're talking about. And that will continue, and therefore, whatever correction there is only going to be short term. And both the precious metals themselves and the precious metals mining stocks are starting now another major leg up, in my view.
And if you look at the numbers, many are so undervalued in relationship to the Dow Jones and to the metals itself. The mining shares are still very cheap. Next question: possible alternatives to gold and silver. I cannot invest 90% in them. Can you? Of course you can, but if you should is a different question. After you have made good provisions in precious metals, diversified deposits and metals, made personal provisions and crisis precautions, invested your money in future education of yourself and your relatives, etc., in what else can you invest?
Yes, and it's a very difficult one. And of course, you could say that it's safer to diversify into a bit of stocks and bonds and other assets. I don't believe in the next phase that it will be. I think that it'd be very dangerous to be invested in or stay in what I call the bubble assets, which is stocks and bonds and property. So this is the time now when precious metals and some commodity stocks will do extremely well. And in my view, okay, if you want to diversify a little bit, you first of all, you buy precious metals shares, of course. But for example, uranium is going to be a massive growth market. It's the only viable alternative energy we have to oil today. So therefore, there are nuclear power plants being built around the world. China, a massive program, for example, and therefore there will be very high demand for uranium. And I think same with oil. Oil will also be very strong in coming years. Now, you could say that if industrial demand goes down, oil might also come down. But oil is also a very political commodity. With the problems we see in the world, Middle East, etc., Strait of Hormuz being closed, the potential of that, and there will be could be shortages of oil, political shortages if you want, and therefore I think so. If you want an alternative, oil is interesting. If you want a more vicious alternative, you can have defense stocks, because the wars will continue, sadly, and could easily escalate. So if you want, I'm not keen on stock markets in general, but defense stocks have done very well and are probably going to continue to do well. So those are some alternative. Obviously, if you feel, property is not a good investment in my view now, but to buy a house where you feel safe yourself, where you don't have a high debt, that's definitely always recommendable, because for your own personal safety and comfort. But otherwise, generally, most asset markets are going to decline dramatically, because we will see a correction of the bubbles we've had in all of this over the last few years.
Different question, Egon, and I think we answered that already, but it came back. Gold in the USA. The USA probably no longer has all of its gold in Fort Knox, what they claim to have on paper. What do you think about Germany, Egon? At least we brought more than 50% back from the USA, and it took many years, as Carl Ludwig Thiele in Munich said. So I think we can be sure to have at least 50%. The rest, like the USA, who knows?
No, I totally agree with that. Last proper physical audit of the US gold was during Eisenhower's time in the mid-50s, 1950s. So nobody knows what they have, and it's very possible. You see, central banks, if they have lent their gold to a bullion bank and leased it in order to earn a bit of return, and then the bullion bank sells this gold to an investor in China or in India, which is where the major buying is taking place of the precious metals. So then all of a sudden, the central bank gold that it owns has gone to a bullion bank, and the bullion bank sells it on, as I said, the physical. Of course, they give an IOU, a debt shine to the central bank, but they'll be worth nothing, because they can't ever deliver that gold against that debt, because the gold has already gone to China or India. So they're never going to give it back. And the central bank, as the Fed, for example, will still count that as their gold, although it's lent it out. So that's why I don't think they have the 8,000 at all. Whilst Germany was clever enough to take back 50%, as you said. But what about the other 50%? We don't know. That's still abroad. So you shouldn't be certain. I think that central banks in general have much less gold than they state in their physical position that they can actually sell now, this minute, because it's probably lent out or leased out, and therefore not available to them when the crisis comes.
Silver, the next topic, we touched it already, Egon. Here it's somebody writes, in about 13 years, no more silver will be mined. All mines worldwide will have been developed and mined out. So they say, I doubt this, by the way. Then we will have to fall back on recycled silver, which will not be enough in the coming years due to rapid increases of electric cars and solar energy. Where could the silver price be then? And would be a silver manipulation still possible? And adding to this, is it realistic to have a 3-digit silver price within the next 5 to 10 years? Let me add something before you answer, Egon. Always new deposits are found. So what the current status is, how many silver is there and can be mined for X, Y, Z years, there are still new discoveries made. So that is the status of today.
Yeah, no, because silver, as with gold, we haven't made any major discoveries that the last ones was, gold, I know it was in the 90s. And silver, I don't have exactly in my mind now, but I think it's the same there. That it is harder to find the metals now. So there, yeah, silver has had shortages for years, which is being manipulated by borrowing, etc. And in the end, yes, there will be, especially if central banks start buying gold instead of holding worthless dollars, which they will become eventually. There will be a lot of demand for metals, and of course both silver and gold. But central banks will buy gold, but the public will buy silver, and I don't think that the people will not accept paper assets anymore. When this happens and they see the shortages, they will ask for delivery, and that will lead to a major revaluation of gold and silver. So therefore, the person asking these questions is absolutely right. I think at some point we will see a squeeze in both gold and silver markets. Now, what will that lead? What silver price will that lead to? I've learned one thing: it's no use forecasting price in the currency in euros or in dollars or whatever, because you got to then know what's the dollar worth at the time or what's the euro worth at the time. It might be worth nothing. So to actually forecast gold and silver prices in fiat money serves no purpose. But I could just take as an example, when we started with gold, I said already then that I expect gold. I don't make forecasts anymore because of the paper currencies being unpredictable in value. But I said that gold in today's terms, and this was 15 years ago, will probably be $10,000 at least. And if the gold-silver ratio went back to the average historical ratio of 15, today, of course, it's 80. But if it goes down to 15 or even anywhere near that, 10,000 gold and 15 ratio, that makes 666 for silver, $666 for silver. Okay, that's playing with numbers, but it's not impossible to see a three-figure silver. Yes, of course it's possible, but again, it's not the important point. The important point, you hold the metals because the currencies are going down in value. You don't know what the currency will be worth when gold and silver if they go to 10,600 or whatever. What is important is by holding the metals, you're protecting against the debasement or the devaluation of the currencies, and that's why you're holding them. And you're not holding for speculation. You're holding them for wealth preservation and wealth protection.
And Egon, if you prepared for this event, you have gold and silver, and then crazy government decisions come along. For instance, is there a risk of a European Union-wide ban of gold and silver? Is that realistic?
Well, there's been talk of confiscation throughout time, and a lot of people ask that question. My simple answer is they have such elegant methods now of confiscating people's money by devalue or debasing the money, number one. Number two, by taxing it. For the governments, it's much more convenient to tax your precious metals than to collect it physically and drive it in, and people will anyway hide it and not deliver it to them. Think about your tax planning. That's as important or more important if you have than thinking about it would be confiscated. But anyway, hold it outside your country of residence, especially if you are in an area which where governments are going to interfere, like the EU, I agree, like probably the US also. So I would rather hold it in a safer, a much more democratic country like Switzerland, which throughout history has proven to be one of the safest countries in the world politically, and it still is, in my view, one of the best countries politically.
I agree, and that fits perfectly to our next question, Egon. In your opinion, will there be a currency reform from the middle of the decade? The middle of the decade is in 2 years. Would access to the safe deposit box then only be possible with a bank employee delegated by the tax office to confiscate, for instance, 30% of the value of your precious metals? You just said it, be careful where you store it.
Yes, don't store your gold or silver or other assets in the bank, because I think the banking system will not survive in its present form, and they might close down for a longer period, and you won't get access to it anyway, especially EU and maybe also in US. But so therefore, this is why we're offering to clients to hold your gold and your silver in private vaults, as I said, in outside your country of residence, if you're in these countries I just mentioned. Hold it in countries like Switzerland, or maybe a little bit of Singapore also, and because they're much safer jurisdictions. So I wouldn't never hold gold or silver within the banking system in a safe deposit box, for many reasons, not just government confiscation, but you don't know if the bank will make it. Or if the bank goes under, you're not going to have access to that asset for a long, long time. So much better to hold it in private vaults outside the banking system.
Next question. How can I exchange my precious metal back into money without being either taxed or expropriated by the state? There is no table transaction when selling, so you have to give your address, etc. I always had the thought of switching to other asset classes, but if it's criminalized, or if you can't prove that it's your own saved money or its origin, it could be confiscated at some point. I know it's nonsense to go into euro or dollars, but it can only be realized with these means. So if you have it, how to turn it back to money?
The more crazy measures that government take to take your money away from you, the less people are going to abide by or accept the laws of the country, and because they have to take their own fortune or wealth into their own hands. Then if governments cheat them, they will cheat back people. What happens then is that people will not declare their assets. I'm not saying that they should or they shouldn't, but I know that's what will happen if governments try to control it. So rather than selling it to fiat money, which government can control because they're controlling the money system, then and they might very well by that time also have banned Bitcoin. So then, a barter system is the other option, of course. Whether that's legal or not, people will do that. So people will barter their gold against food or against another asset, a property, or even buying a business with a gold, etc. So there will be a barter system in gold. Now that's much more difficult for governments to stop if that is their desire to stop it. So I think bartering could easily be one way of getting around this. Although, if we get to that fascist type state, then it'll be difficult for all of us. But people will find ways, definitely.
They always did, and such times make creative, I am absolutely sure. Isn't it the case that the elite produces disasters themselves, and then when people cry out for a solution, they present it? For instance, central bank digital currencies with an expiration date are such an example. In short, financial and personal privacy is slowly but surely disappearing under a CBDC system. Absolutely correct. Therefore, I would really fight to avoid it. Now, a hypothetical question. Do you think that previous rulers would have introduced a totalitarian monetary system if the technical possibilities had existed? If they can, they would try.
Of course they would, absolutely. And this questioner, also the person who asked this question, he's right that the elite actually creates a catastrophe in order to implement more control. And if people want to listen to an interesting interview that's just come out on YouTube, is Tucker Carlson with Alex Jones. Alex Jones has been cancelled by the world as a, as someone who is not wanted, because he has exposed so many truths. But this is a fascinating interview, just doing what this questioner said, that actually, the states and governments invent catastrophes in order for them to come up with more rigorous control of the people.
Therefore, we have to be awake and watch very carefully what they plan and try to protect the freedom that we still have. And to this also belongs cash money, of course, to protect this.
Yeah.
Totally different question, Egon. We have it from time to time, Bitcoin. If we look at the chart, okay, it had a very nice run. It went from 20 and something to over 40,000 euros. What do you think about it? It's limited and decentralized. I think for speculation, perfect, but wealth preservation?
Well, the people who went into Bitcoin early, and there were a lot of people who did. I mean, they made fortunes. The people who went in late, I mean, many of them have lost money because they went in too high. My view has always been the same on Bitcoin, Jan, that it could be a spectacular investment, and it could go to $1 million, for example. But it could also go to zero because governments and central banks decide that if Bitcoin became too powerful and worth too much money, they're not going to allow nobody to control their monetary system than themselves. So therefore, they could ban Bitcoin or other digital currencies also. So therefore, for me, this is kind of a binary risk. It's either $1 million or nothing. And that's not a good risk. So that is a risk only for speculation, in my view, not for wealth preservation. Gold and electronic entries onto a computer or onto a memory card, if you want, or a USB stick, cannot be seen, in my view, as wealth preservation. And therefore, I wouldn't recommend it for wealth preservation, but it could be interesting for speculation.
But as we always say, and for a long time say, Egon, never put all your eggs into one basket. We are not suggesting to somebody to put 100% of his or her wealth into physical precious metals. Of course not.
No, we're not. But the problem is when I, look at all the alternatives, it's very difficult what you do with your money. Should you diversify for the sake of it? Should you buy a bit of stocks, a bit of property, a bit of bonds that or that I believe are all going to collapse in relation to real money, into gold and silver? So that's the dilemma. There are not, in this overinflated or overvalued system now, there are not many assets that are actually good value. So precious metals are. So I think if ever this is a time, then people should have a higher percentage in precious metals than ever before. And of course, in the olden days, people had a lot of their money into precious metals. Also, even in more modern times, people who fled from countries, people who fled from African countries, Uganda, for example, and then the other countries. And, the only way they could flee from there was to have gold and jewelry or gold. They came out with that. They couldn't come out with anything else. And they could start again with that. I think this now times speak for a higher allocation to precious metals than at any time in history that I'm aware of in modern times, certainly. So yeah, don't put all your eggs in one basket. But at the same time, you could say, as Rockefeller said, he was in oil, of course. Put all your eggs in one basket and look after the basket. So that's another way. I'm not going to tell people what percentage they should have, but I'm certainly, our investors have a very high percentage in gold and silver because they believe that is the best form of wealth preservation, and that there are not that many alternatives. But people should put whatever they feel is comfortable for them into silver and gold. But as I said, I would recommend a higher percentage than you normally would in present times.
we also get the question, or I get the question regarding silver, for instance. It is at a lower price than 2011. It takes time and time. In the meantime, you could have invested elsewhere. We know all these arguments, but then I argue, look around you. We are now in a situation that is much different from 2011. There are so many dangers around us. It is now, as you said, really the time to have a high percentage in precious metals. And the question for other alternatives we answered already. Uranium, for instance, energy stocks, defense. There are still alternatives that can have a nice yield, but it's now the time, my opinion, I think you will agree, not to make fortunes, but to protect what you have. And many will not be able to achieve that.
No, and you know, it's also, you got to bet, it's not just that you're, you know, you can make a little bit of money or protect your money, but for many people, by just having, who can't afford to buy big amounts of gold or silver, we're not talking about just buying, you know, wealthy investors, is for everybody. So I often say, for example, if somebody in Venezuela, you know, in 2000 roughly, 23 years ago, had bought some gold, it was about the same price as, because currency was about the same as the dollar then, so it was a similar price, you know, and now it's in the billions. You know, they would have protected their assets and their wealth. And you know, I had somebody approaching me in Switzerland once, a restaurant owner, and he pointed at me and said, told my friends, listen to this man, because he understands gold. He said he had followed me. And he said, my whole family lost all their money in Yugoslavia in the hyperinflation in the 90s. And I had some, and I could leave the country and start again here in Switzerland. I had some gold, you know, so that's, even if you have a smaller amount, that will help you so much when times really get bad and the currencies are destroyed. So remember that, because that's what it's all about, you know, protecting yourself, protecting your family from these risks that are more elevated now, that, as I said before, that they ever been in history.
Final question, Egon. Amount was the keyword here. Why does your company only offer gold purchases from 100,000 euro on? I think it's 400,000, and
Yeah.
not, for instance, 25,000 euros or dollars. What could people do who want to invest a smaller amount?
Well, we are specializing in a very high level of personal service, and we can't provide that properly for amounts of, let's say, $25,000 as to start with. But we have an associated company called Gold Broker, who can do that. And I would, you know, suggest that people go to them. I mean, they do similar, exactly, store gold, so same way as we do, outside the banking system, in private vaults in Switzerland. So that's an alternative for the smaller investor. That is a very good alternative. From 400,000 on, of course, we are a major company globally in this area, and for private wealth outside of in precious metals, outside the banking system, for high net worth individuals, we're today most probably the biggest in the world.
Egon, that was a good final statement. Now we can only wish to our audience and to you, of course, a Merry Christmas, a good New Year, and then in alter Frische, in English, in old freshness, in new old freshness. We talk again in the new year, okay?
Absolutely. But yeah, thank you, and yes, and yeah, wish everybody a wonderful holiday or Christmas, New Year. And I think, you know, next year could be a difficult year for the world, and therefore you should be prepared, because sadly, when gold and silver go up, which I think they will do, your quality of life is not going to be as good as it is today, because there'll be a lot of problems around you in the world. So be prepared for that. In the meantime, everyone should enjoy, as you say, Christmas and New Year, and we'll see.
And we are a community, Egon, and we support each other.
Absolutely.
And we are not alone.
Think about helping friends and family, you know, especially in times which will be difficult. You know, that's the most important thing. More important than gold or silver or money or anything, helping each other, supporting people.
thank you for today, and we talk next year.
Thank you, Jan.
Bye bye.